Math Genie. Last week I started a series of videos where I solve 100 math problems that appear frequently in middle school mathematics competitions. My first video covered solving consecutive integer problems. And in this video, I'll be teaching how to solve work together problems in a simple way. So to solve these work problems, you need to understand to use a certain method that you can apply to all work problems, and it is in 3 steps. And I'll be covering all of these 3 steps throughout this video. So let's look at an example question. Michael can paint a house in 10 hours, and it takes Angela 14 hours to paint the same house. How long will it take for the 2 painters together to paint the house? Express your answer in hours and minutes. So let's first look at the clues and the information we're given with in the problem. So we're given that we have 2 painters. We have Michael, and we have the other painter, Angela. And we're given that one of the painter, Michael, he can paint a house in 10 hours. So that means he can paint an entire house in 10 hours. So it takes him 10 hours to paint one house. And for Angela, it takes her 14 hours to paint one entire house. So we're given that from the very, very beginning of the question. What we're trying to figure out here is how long it will take both of them together to paint the entire house. So we're given with how long it takes for both of them to paint the house individually, but we're trying to figure out how much they can paint or how long it takes for them to paint together. So as I mentioned before, there are a total of 3 steps when solving these particular problems. And the first step is how we need to first figure out how much of the work they can do per hour. How much, in this case, of the house can Michael and Angela paint per hour? This is the important part. We need to figure out how much of the house they can paint per hour. So if you don't really understand why we have to figure this out, I'm going to draw a little diagram for you so it'll be easier for you to understand. So if we take Michael, for instance, so we have Michael, and we're trying to figure out how much of the work he can do per hour, I'm going to draw a diagram, as I said, and let's just say that this bar here, this is going to represent the entire house, or the entire work that Michael has to do, which is to paint the entire house. And I'm going to divide this up into 10 equal sections. And each of these sections are going to represent 1 hour. Because as I said, it takes him a total of 10 hours to paint the entire house. So if I say that this is 1 hour, 10 of them together is going to make up 10 hours. So let's just take this one block here. What does this also represent? This also represents 1 hour, but it also shows that this is 1/10 of the entire work. Because as I said, there are 10 blocks, and the one of the blocks are obviously going to be 1/10 of the entire thing. So what this is telling me is that Michael, he can paint 1/10 of the house in 1 hour, or you can just say per hour. And this is obviously shown here because look, 1 hour, that represents 1 block. So this it's representing can paint how much? 1/10 of the house in per hour. So we already figured out how much of the work Michael can do per hour. Now we just need to figure out how much Angela can do. The same thing with Angela. We could draw the block again, and we can figure it out by drawing a diagram, but you can't do that every single time you are at a competition. So what you can do is just simply remember that it's always going to be 1 over 14. This is going to represent the entire work that the person has to do. And the bottom number is going to represent how long it takes for someone to do the entire work. So for example, if there's another person named, I don't know, Catherine, and she can do, and she can paint the entire house in 8 hours, her work rate would be 1 over 8. So instead of drawing a diagram like we did for Michael all the time, we can just do what we're doing for Angela here. We can just simply use this method. 1 over how long it takes for someone to do the entire work. Another important thing you have to remember here is that the entire house, in this case, or the entire work, is always represented by number 1. So entire work or total amount of work that someone has to do is always represented by number 1. So in this case, the entire house is represented by number 1. So that's why we're putting 1 for the entire work. So we already figured out how much work Michael and Angela can do. So instead of having to have this information here, you can simply just write that Michael, it takes him 1/10 of the hour, can do 1/10 of the work per hour, and Angela can do 1/14 of the work per hour. And as I said, that is the first step that you need to take when you're solving work together problems. Now let's just get rid of all of these since we don't need that anymore. And now I'm going to be talking about the second step that you need to take in solving work together problems. So the second step that you need to take is pretty much self-explanatory, because as the question says, you're trying to figure out how much of the work they can do together. So what you're going to do in the second step is to figure out how much of the work Michael and Angela can do together per hour. So how much work? I'm going to say Michael and Angela can do together. This is important. Together per hour. So this is what you're trying to figure out in the second step. So you might be wondering, then how do I figure out how much of the work they can do together? Like, I understand how to find the individual rates, but how do I find it for together? Simply, you just have to add 1/10 plus 1/14. There's really nothing special that you need to do here. You just have to add how much work Michael can do per hour and how much work Angela can do per hour. And this is going to give you how much they can do together per hour. So if we find the common denominators, so for Michael and Angela, I can already see that 10 and 14 have the common denominator of 70, so this is going to be 7 over 70 plus, and for 14, it's going to be 5 over 70. And when we add the numerators, we'll get 12 over 70. And this can be reduced to 6 over 35. So this number here that we're left with, this represents how much work Michael and Angela can do together per hour. So Angela and Michael can paint 6/35 of the house per hour. This is what we can find here. So I'm going to write that right here. 6/35 of the house together per hour. And that is the second step that you need to take when solving these type of problems. And now let's look at our final step when solving work together problems. And the final step is to find out how long it will take for them to paint the entire house. To paint the entire house. And since I'm going to use ratio for the last step, because we're already given how much of the work they can do per hour. So I'm going to do 6/35/1 equals. And as I said, this right here is representing how much of the work they can do. Work they can do. And this number 1 is representing how long it takes. So per hour. And now I'm going to set up an equation. And now we're trying to figure out how much of the work they need to do, how long it will take for them to paint the entire house. So this number 1 is representing the work they have to do. This represents the entire work. Because this number here, this is only representing how much of the work they can do per hour, not the entire work. So I'm trying to figure out a ratio of them. And I'm going to write the variable x for how long it will take. So this represents, we don't know how much hour this is going to be. So to solve these type of problems, as we know, we're supposed to cross and multiply. So if we multiply 36 and x and 1 and 1, we'll simply get, and I'll do the work over here, we'll simply get 6/35x equals number 1. And we don't really have to do any more work here. We can just get that x equals 35/6, because we know that a number times its reciprocal is going to equal 1. So we're already done answering the question. We're not really technically done, because the answer is, the question is asking for us to answer our question in hours and minutes. And this is not answering in hours and minutes. This is only giving us 35/6 hours. So we need to simplify this. So we'll simply get blank hours and blank minutes. And to convert this to hours and minutes, we simply have to write this number here, 35/6, to a mixed fraction. So that's going to be 5 and 5/6. So we know this is going to be 5 hours and 50 minutes, since 5/6 is also equal to 50/60. So the final answer to this question is going to be 5 hours and 50 minutes. So this is how to solve work together problems. As I said, you need to just know these 3 simple steps. 1, figure out how much of the work they can do per hour individually. 2, add those up. Add, in this case, 1/15 and 1/14 to get how much of the work you can do together per hour. That's the second step. And the final step is to figure out how long it will take for both of them to paint the entire house. And you can do that by setting up a proportion like this. 1/15 is And at the very end, if you do need to convert your answers, like in this case you had to in hours and minutes, you can simply do that at the very, very last step. And that will be the end to this video. Math Genie.